Hey everyone, welcome to the Givingtown podcast brought to you by the Joyful Roberts Group. I'm your host, Danielle Roberts, and today I'm excited and honored to bring you this conversation with Newberg-Dundee Police Chief Jeff Kosmicki. Also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to get our latest podcast episodes, our Living in Newberg YouTube videos, our homeowner tips, senior resources, and so much more sent right to your inbox. If that sounds good to you, there's a link in the show notes to subscribe. Well, as you can tell by the length of this episode, we've got a lot to cover. As I mentioned, I had the opportunity to talk to Chief Kosmicki, who's been serving as police chief for just over 5 years when you account for his time as interim chief. In this packed episode, you're going to learn about how Jeff got started in his career with police work, what it's actually like as a police officer behind the wheel of a patrol car, what it was like in the wake of the defund the police movement. We're going to look at technology of the police department, look into their philosophy and kind of how they operate. We're going to do some myth busting about quotas and a lot of other misconceptions. We'll also talk about the D.A.R.E programs in the schools and how they're raising up the next generation of students, and several other things that I don't have time to list all right here. But again, there's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Well, Chief, thanks for joining me today. I know technically your title is Chief Kosmicki, but you said to call you Jeff, so throughout I'll call you Jeff, but glad you could be here.
Please
today.
Just call me Jeff, yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to this. It's actually been for quite a while, ever since, Jim Wheaton, right? He was the president of the, foundation, right? The
Yes, he was.
Foundation. And, through that conversation, it just made me realize, well, I really need to have a conversation with Jeff. So glad we could kind of come full circle and have you on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
As we get started, I just want to hear a little bit of your story. What inspired you to become a police officer? Was that since you were a kid, or was it more of as you grew up, of something you decided?
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone has a different story. Mine starts off probably a little corny. My parents were divorced. I lived with my mom, and I think, through that, I was always sort of, pretty protective of my mom and that kind of stuff. And I had a great relationship with my dad. They just, they weren't married, and still have a great relationship with both of them. So I think I've always kind of had that protective instinct, or at least, that's kind of where I got it. And I've always, thought that, or seen police officers, and I thought it was pretty cool, but I, really kind of had something else in mind. I went to George Fox and graduated with a business degree.
Oh, when did you graduate?
94. Yeah, I graduated in 94. I got married in 93.
Okay.
To the best half of the relationship. She's not here right now, but she's definitely the best part. We were gonna, maybe do something in business, or I was kind of looking maybe insurance or, something like that. And then, I did a ride along. The restaurant thing sort of fell through, and it takes a lot of money to generate one of those and to do one of those. And so that really wasn't an option. But I did a ride along with a friend of mine in Oregon City. And after that ride along, I was hooked. I really saw myself as being a police officer. I enjoyed, every aspect. Of course, a couple ride-alongs doesn't give you every aspect, so maybe I should have done a couple more, but no, just kidding. I was kind of hooked after that. Just the work itself, sort of being that mediator, the one that solves problems, or best you can, try to solve as many as you can. So that's kind of how I got my start. And then I started as a reserve, and I was hired, after about a year of being a reserve, and the rest is kind of history. I've been very fortunate my entire career to, be in the right spot for promotions, and, tried to do my best at all points to make myself, more attractive for any kind of a special assignment or a promotion or something like that. And I've just been extremely fortunate.
Yeah. So you did a ride along. So what you weren't like me when I was a little boy, and I'm sure many little boys either think they're going to be a police officer or firefighter. I think you have a very, you meaning like people have a very, as a child, a naive outlook on what it actually involves. So by doing a ride along, you probably had a more accurate picture of what I know it's only one ride along, but what are some things that you've experienced, or that you did experience once you actually joined, that made you go, oh, I didn't realize this is what this job entailed?
Well, I can show you. So I try to be a pretty humble, or bring a lot of humility to this profession. And I can tell you this, you mentioned the word naivety, and I have a story that this is Jeff Kosmicki in a nutshell, prior to, really kind of grasping, what I was doing. And I'd just been hired. I was about 27 when I was 26 when I got hired. And then I was about 27 years old. And I just remember, going to get, to contact someone on a warrant for their arrest. And, I remember going back there with my partner. I went to the back, and I was fairly new as far as full time. And so we go to this back because we hear this noise, and this person has a warrant for their arrest. And the other officer goes to the other side, and I'm on the other side of this house, and we kind of have them sort of triangulated. And the officer says, "Hey, so-and-so, you're under arrest." And the guy looks at him and turns and runs in a house. And my first thought wasn't, "Oh, I need to go get him." My first thought was, doesn't he know where the police? Well, yeah, he knows where the police. That's why he's running. But my naive brain was like, "Oh, he must not know where the police. He knows." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was thinking, you're so dumb. So I just took off running. The guy runs to the house, and then we end up catching him and all that stuff. But I can just tell you, there's probably a million stories of people are being honest where, you're not necessarily what I would say you're in, like, cop mode or, police mode. You're still trying to figure out, is my uniform, on right? Is my vest tucked in? Do I have my handcuffs? All that kind of stuff. We're still people. And, that was part that, it probably took me 5 or 6 months to sort of get that, type of brain, or like when you come to work, you're a little more skeptical, because people lie to you all the time, and you just have to work through those things. But yeah, I would say probably the first 6 months I felt, and then you look back and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you're so naive. Of course the guy's running, that kind of stuff. I've had a lot of those moments. So
it's kind of like parenting in some ways. Like as a kid, you look at your parents and think, oh, well, they must know what they're doing. And then you realize, oh, they don't have a clue, and neither do I.
I could not think of a better example than what you just gave. That you are 100% spot on, exactly right. You think your parents know everything, and you think, I also remember, driving around before I was a police officer thinking, oh my gosh, there's a police officer got behind me. He's going to know that I have, expired tag. I don't know, whatever it is, but, I'm doing 3 miles over the speed limit. And then you get in the car and you got 2 radios, you got an AM FM radio, you have maybe a radar, you're always scanning for traffic. There's all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of divided attention and distractions.
Yeah.
So, I like to say that we know every single thing about every single person, that's within that 20-foot radius, but this is not true. We have a lot of really good officers that are way better than I am. But I think, you have to remember everyone's still human. And you can kind of forget that.
As like I mentioned, as a boy, I thought I was going to be a police officer. And
there's still time.
I have a very strong, there is. I have a very strong, justice. I want things to be right. Which we'll get to how the actually can sometimes be a challenge when the law doesn't always, what you feel is right. You're bound by the law. You can kind of cover that in a minute, but also, so between that and also I went to George Fox for engineering until I got into real estate. So I like knowing how things work. So my apologies to anyone listening who, doesn't geek out about this kind of stuff. But I think just everyone in the public, when you see a police officer, you immediately, okay, check my speed. Oh my gosh, are my tags expired? Or, whatever else it is, like you said. What is it like actually being in, whether you're on patrol or, I guess different people, sometimes you're just driving to somewhere. You don't have your sirens on, but you're going somewhere. You're not necessarily focused on everything around you, but what is it like actually being in the car? And you kind of know everyone kind of has that perspective, but what are you actually focused on?
Well, one of the things that, about police work is there's a lot of negativity, and you don't really, that's one of the things you don't really realize until you're kind of into it. You hand out citations, you deal with a lot of death, just even normal death, usually if someone passes away that's older, or, maybe they're not so old and they pass away. You deal with all that stuff. You deal with, a lot of assaults. You can have family members upset if someone call the police. We make an arrest and they're mad at us. You called us, and of course, we want to investigate that. We want to right those wrongs. But I think you asked me something else.
What was it like being, I guess just the perspective, like as you're in the car, for example, like, everyone thinks like, oh my gosh, like they know everything about me, like you said, but like, what is your actual perspective when you're?
Yeah. So, my perspective, I think when you when you put your uniform on, you get into the car, you have to have a little bit different perspective. It's not like going to the grocery store. You're a little bit, I don't like to say on edge, but you're you're a little more hyper focused on things because you have to be.
Right.
You always have to temper, there's training. I'll give you a good example. And this is again, sort of naive when I went to Reserve Academy. You watch these films in the academy and, there was one called Edged Weapons. And I left that thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this job. I'm going to get stabbed every time we turn the corner. Those types of things. And then you sort of, put some perspective on it and some reality. You're like, okay, I understand the object of these videos to make you hyper vigilant and to pay attention. But I think there's so much of it. Sometimes, you come out thinking, something's bad's going to happen to you around every single corner. And the fact is, that's not the case. You need to be careful. You need to pay attention. You're dealing with other human beings, and most people are good, but they also don't have a label that says I'm bad, I'm mean, I'm going to beat you up. You have to make those observations. So, you have to keep everything in perspective and in a balance, because quite honestly, we have 36 police officers for Newberg-Dundee. If people were really bad, that's not enough people to correct that or to take care of the problem or, to make sure that people are safe or to help people be safe. So I think the reality is most people are good. They just make mistakes. And then, there's a smaller percentage that are really, really bad people. And so I think keeping that in perspective. So when you're in the car, you kind of have to be ready to deal with that really, really bad person, but also be ready to, I would say, when I say dial it back, I don't mean, you're yelling and screaming at people, but, you realize that you're dealing with normal people, good people that just made mistakes. So does that help?
I think so. I think one thing is like when you're driving, and it might be different for you because your role is a little different than someone maybe who's on like traffic patrol. But everyone thinks like, oh my gosh, if I like slow down too fast, or if I, like you're just looking out to write me a ticket. Which one, I know that's not the perspective of the, police department, but that was kind of what I was curious. Like, what are the things you actually look for? Like if you're on traffic patrol, like what are the actual things you look for?
Yeah, I think if you're assigned to traffic, your threshold is probably a little lower because, what I mean is you're probably doing more stops, on certain things. You don't have time necessarily on patrol to do as much traffic as a traffic officer, because you have to respond to calls. So your threshold is going to come up a little bit as far as maybe what you'll stop, or, maybe you'll stop more dangerous behavior versus semi-dangerous behavior, or things that are technically violations that could get somebody hurt or, cause a crash, versus the things that will cause somebody to get a crash. So yeah, I think different assignments have different outcomes. Traffic is a lot of education, and sometimes that's through citation. Sometimes it's just through stopping and saying, hey, don't do that. Here's a warning, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a balance. No matter what assignment, it's always a balance. But we try not, as the police department, we try not to be heavy handed for sure. Cause we still have to have the consent of the public that we work for. Right. We don't want to stop every single thing that happens or, nitpick the heck out of people. But you want to be reasonable. Everything is in reasonable terms.
Yeah. What kind of technology do the cars have? Because can your car tell, like if you're on traffic control, like can it read like all the speeds of the cars around you, or like I've always wondered, because I talked to one officer years ago. He's like, oh yeah, if like, I can tell the speed of the cars behind me and in front of me. I was just curious how that works.
That's true. Yeah. You have 2 radar units, one in the front, one in the back.
Okay.
And probably about, 5 or 6 years ago, we started building our cars with that moving radar. So we have both moving radar as well as stationary radar. It's the same unit, but, they're constantly monitoring, traffic.
I'm just curious what it looks like on your screen. Like, how can you tell, you've got one in the front, one in the back, you also have to drive, you got your monitor there, you got your radios. Does it buzz you if hey, that car behind you is going that speed? Or how do you know which car it's actually looking at?
They're visual and audible. So
okay.
and the visual is right above the screen.
Okay.
Sorry, the speedometer. So we place those things so we don't really have to take our eyes off the road. You can look down slightly and then look back up, but it's audible and
so it'll tell you, you can look on a screen and you can see the speed of the car,
Yep, and it's right above our vehicle's speedometer.
Okay. Huh. So the car in front of you, behind you, how many cars can it track?
It just depends. Usually it'll be the fastest. Sometimes it's the largest. It just depends on how,
so it's got some intelligence to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So if there's if you're on 99, there's a ton of cars, but if there's a guy going 50 miles an hour, it'll pick up hey, that guy.
It'll pick up the fastest. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then of course, you visually notice, which one is obviously going faster than the rest.
Yeah. That brings up a really interesting point because there's, I call it a cultural speed limit. I know it's not the right term, but on 99 going to Sherwood, the speed limit's 55. Everyone goes 70. And I feel like I'm going to get hit or run off the road if I don't go 70, but it's you can't go, you're not supposed to go 15 over the speed limit. What is, as an officer, what is your perspective on something like that?
Each officer has their own, sort of threshold. And, that's one of the things about being a police officer. You have that ability to kind of, set your own limits. Also, if you're in a residential area, 15 over is a heck of a lot worse than 15 over, going, not that it's good, but
sure.
Than 99. But I think, each officer has their own threshold. And quite honestly, if there's no enforcement between the cities like that, you see your speeds creep up.
So it'd have to be a state trooper.
Well, we could do it, but there's really no benefit to it. It's not our jurisdiction. We can go all over in the state and do whatever we want, right? But cities of Newberg and Dundee pay our salaries. So I think it's important to kind of try to stay as much, unless you're helping or assisting another agency. It's your responsibility to kind of make sure that your area is the safest. So we try to stay within those boundaries or, on the outskirts and that kind of stuff. So,
okay.
Primarily state police or, Washington County or Yamhill County Sheriff's Office. That's kind of their area to work.
I didn't have that question planned, but as far as when the sheriff takes over or police department, because there's certain parts that look like they're within city limits, but usually, my wife there's something happening. She called the police. She said, well, where are you? And she described, no, where exactly are you? Yeah. Because it actually had to be the sheriff's department.
They geolocate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so why is that? Is it if, for example, there's something happening, if it's not your jurisdiction, I guess I just don't understand how that works. The collaboration between sheriff's office and police department.
Yeah. So we like to work our own areas. We get paid to work and respond in those areas. So, I'm not saying, we have a bad relationship, with the sheriff's office. We have a great relationship with them, but, we try to stay within those jurisdictional boundaries as far as what cases we take, what cases they take. And it can be fluid. If they're completely, busy and they don't have anybody to take it, they can ask us and then we'll take it. So if they ask us, we'll take it. And we've had them come in if we're super busy and take a few calls within our city. So it is, but we try to get it to where we try to direct those calls to where they belong. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
They have people on patrol that are supposed to take care of those areas, and we have people that are supposed to take care of our areas. We still work collaboratively, but we really try in the initial end to you take yours, we'll take ours.
Yeah.
So it's more of just responsibility.
That makes sense. So back to the question, if you're, just so I can have peace of mind, just know I'm doing the right thing. If there's cars that are behind me feel like I'm slowing them down and cars passing me, like, is it better to go with the flow of traffic or just stick to?
You have to be comfortable with whatever citation you
Sure.
you might get.
Fair enough.
So I would say scoot over to the right and let those cars go by on the left. So whatever speed you're comfortable with. Of course, we would tell everyone to drive speed limit and that stuff, but that's just not reality. I mean, I wish it were, and honestly, 70 probably, well, I better not say that, but, 70 may or may not get a citation. They may be sitting out there waiting for 80s. I don't know what their, threshold is and what they see, out there. But yeah, you could have.
Well, I personally know someone who got a citation at 73. This funny story, I got pulled over once. I used to work over in the Clackamas area and was coming back and, just wasn't really paying attention and saw lights on, or no, I didn't even see the lights on behind me. I saw a police officer pass me. This is on 205 and he pulls over and I was like, well, he's gonna, light me up. So I pulled over even before he put his lights on and he pulls up behind me. And it turned out if I'd forgotten to register my car when I bought it, it was like one of the first cars I bought. I just didn't think about it. And I was like, I just said, I'm a little surprised, honestly. I think it's going like 70 that I appreciate you not writing me a ticket. I'm not telling you to. He's like, I'll be here for 10 minutes and I'll catch someone to go in 100. So I was like, my gosh. Yeah. And it's, I guess you're right. Everyone has their threshold. I mean, he very easily could have for sure, because it wouldn't have been a cheap ticket.
Sure.
But just I guess you're right.
Threshold and where he's from. Yeah. I mean, he was being completely honest. He's like, no, that's nothing compared to what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the people. If I'm out stopping people that are maybe doing 70, which is not, ridiculous. I mean, there's, I went to Idaho, their speed limit is 80, so, you want to catch those people going 100 that are a lot more reckless. It's all, it's all violation, but
which I get. It is interesting because it's like, at some point, people, you can't just drive faster and faster and saying, someone else is going to go faster than me. And it's like, it's a dangerous way to live. Speed limits are there for a reason, and bringing it to engineering, because I don't want, people to think, I can speed and get away with it. There's a really interesting, kinetic energy principle that the faster you go, it's not going from 25 to 35. It's not linear. The kinetic energy of a vehicle is actually squared to the velocity. Mm-hmm. So if you're going 10 miles an hour faster, it's not a linear proportion. It's actually much more dangerous. I don't know if you have training or data, or you guys learn about that kind of.
I wouldn't say that. I've seen that on some crash data. I'm no expert. I'm not a crash expert or reconstructionist, but they talk about that. And I've always found it interesting. Every once in a while, they say motorcycles are just that anomaly that are just weird because they have the two wheels rolling, and they can just end up places where you don't necessarily think they would end up because of the way they spin. Yeah. The wheel turns, and I've just been told those are a lot harder to know exactly what happened on every single, like a car, you can get that down pretty easily. Yeah. Scuffs, on the pavement, tire, rotations and, skidding and, all that stuff is a little easier than what a motorcycle is, what I've been told. So yeah, that the centrifugal force and the physics has always amazed me. Yeah.
Just as a reminder, if you drive fast, the probability of you injuring or killing someone is to the square of your velocity.
Yeah. It's not a 1-for-1.
So don't speed just because you might not get pulled over for going 3 over. Leave it at that.
Yeah. And you're really not, making up that much, distance. If someone goes 10 over, it's 10 miles in an hour. Yeah. So if you're going to Sherwood, you're not going to make that. It feels like you might be going, but you're really not.
Yeah. And then you'll pull up to the light behind the person who was going 15 miles an hour fast. All the time. Yeah. All right. What is your, actually I want to get to that question in a second. A while ago, I saw that Newberg was rated like the 4th safest town in Oregon. Do you have stats on where we sit now, or how that compares?
So the last 2 years we've been 5th, safest. And so, we, in the state of Oregon, I think probably for cities our size, we're probably a little higher. But again, you've got to match it on everything. You got to go with all the cities in Oregon. So we've been pretty fortunate to stay fifth. Of course, I'd love to be number one.
Yeah.
But that all changed, and I can't. That all changed in about 2021 or two, when we started having. And I can't tell you that this is exactly why. I'm just saying these two things existed in the same space. We started attracting more homeless people. And then crime went up, and then of course, people don't, because we get the reports, right? People don't feel as safe when they can't use the parks, and you have people that are clearly mentally deficient, and they have, they're in the parks and they're yelling and screaming and cussing, and people just don't want to be around that. And I completely understand that. I wouldn't be comfortable with that either with my kids. So I'm, like I said, I'm not saying that that's exactly why, but that is one of the big correlations.
What kind of things are measured with when you talk about safe? I mean, there's so many different ways you could look at that.
Yeah. Usually, all the crimes that get reported to the state and the feds, usually they go off the federal crime statistics.
Okay.
And so that's typically where they get those.
So these are things like property crimes, violent crimes, those kind of things.
Yep. Okay. Property crimes, violent crimes, sex crimes, which are violent crimes, and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think they also have a part of it is a per officer per thousand. How many officers do you have per thousand residents?
Okay.
That's a little bit of a factor in that as well.
Okay. So I know Sherwood, Westland, Lake Oswego. I know those are in the top 3, if I remember right. What's 4 now?
I should know this. There's Lake Oswego, Sherwood, Westland.
I thought. Right?
And then there's usually one out east.
Okay.
I just can't think of the name. A little bit smaller.
Not the Dalles. I was there, and that's
no. Yeah, no.
Either way, I don't remember what it was. I just remember looking. I was like, those are all super expensive places to live.
Yeah.
And we, for the price, price to live, or price to actually get a home here, to the safety, we at least rank top on that side. Yeah. So that's what I tell people. What is your perspective on positive policing? Have you learned about that, or know what I know I mentioned it in the question I shared, but I heard about a police department somewhere in the country. Basically, they drive around and look basically for someone who is doing something good. So like they would see someone who was like helping someone with their groceries, or helping, they just did something that was kind, and they'd, give them like a gift card or something. And for that city, I don't remember which one it was, but the crime actually began to go down a lot, because the people saw police as not just someone who's there to hit you over the head with something, but to actually, like, oh, these are people that are in charge, not of keeping us from being dangerous, but also helping the town, kind of like encouraging good behavior. So I was just curious if you've heard of those studies, or what your thoughts were on that.
I haven't heard of those studies. I've seen some people, do things like they hand out turkeys, during Thanksgiving, or just prior to Thanksgiving, those kind of things, which is, positive. I haven't seen any of those studies. So I don't really know. Oh, okay. I don't have a, big frame of reference. The one thing I do try to do is provide a positive environment for our police officers. So that, if they're happy, when I say happy, if they're fulfilled and happy and feel respected, I think that creates a much more positive environment. I don't want them to feel like any extra pressure that's unnecessary, because I want them to go out and do a good job. I want them to feel good about the community. I want them to treat people with respect and compassion, in those types of things. So I don't know that really answered your question, but that's as far as positive policing for how I look at the police department, or the employees there.
And I know Newberg-Dundee Police Department is one of the few that is fully staffed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's pretty rare.
Yeah. I think, Sherwood is, I think we just had someone leave and went to Portland.
Okay.
And we already have someone hired that's wants to come work for us. So yeah, we're very fortunate in that we don't have a lot of vacancies. Knock on wood, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, I guess the question about positive policing, it's interesting, and I guess this is a deeper philosophical type question. Um, in the strictest sense, the police department's role is to enforce the law, right? Um, and I just think whether it's a gift or a curse, I always think of like, well, what if this or what if this? And it just made me think of when you look at the deeper, some of the deeper issues of like what causes crime in the first place. It's like a Family Place is a great organization here in town who they work with people to try to keep them. And I think you shared a little bit about this at City Club a while back. When people are going through really traumatic experiences, whether it's the loss of a job or they're dealing with abuse or whatever the situation is, they're a lot more likely when they're feeling very frustrated, desperate, and hopeless to commit a crime of some kind, or that's when abuse, like child abuse situation, often happens.
Alcohol, drug use, types of things.
So what are your perspective as a police department, when it comes to, you even mentioned like, it'd be great to be first. Like what would it take to actually get there to feel like, or what kinds of things?
Yeah, certainly less crime. One of the things that's sort of a double-edged sword is if you are out and you are enforcing laws and detecting crime and that stuff, then you sort of have more of it. And what I mean by that is, let's say if I took and I had, say 4 police officers to work all of Monday, right? But then on Thursdays, I had, say 12. I promise you the stats would look like Thursdays are massive crime days because you have more police officers out detecting those things.
Sure.
So if you have an active department that gets out and talks to people, stays out of the office and goes to work and tries to detect crime and, writing citations, that wouldn't show up on a crime report, but by doing those traffic stops, you could find traffic crimes. So if you just didn't do anything, your crime rate would probably go down, but it may not be very safe. So you have to hit that happy medium, I think, as long as you have folks out working, and doing the right things, not being officious, not, being badge heavy is what I would refer to, being reasonable, and getting to know your community. I think that's where the strength comes in. And those are your true numbers. If you're not out working, you may have less crime, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a safer city, if that makes sense.
Sure. What about, so say you're at that right balance, and when we're talking about the actual crime that's happening in that sense of what types of things cause there to be more crime or less crime, and how would we move towards being a town where there's less actual crime happening, and as a culture, like for me, I'm not going to go out and rob a store. Like, I'm just like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, why would I do that? Or I'm not going to, go and shoot someone or rob someone. And having that citywide, to have that perspective, like to have more people have that perspective, where some people, for whatever reason, that's just not a part of their ethos. And they're like, well, if I can have some kind of advantage of doing this, or I'm hurting, does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. So, yeah, I think, each town probably is made up of different socioeconomic, issues. I mean, if you had a town full of bank executives, maybe there's not a lot of theft, but maybe there is.
Just white collar theft. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
it's legal theft, as we call it.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Sure.
We don't have a lot of, so if you take like us in McMinnville, and nothing against McMinnville, but they have a lot of county services. So the socioeconomic, will be different. We have a college that really doesn't, with George Fox, it doesn't really cause the police department a lot of problems. Probably the most of what we deal with them is them being victims of theft. Someone who comes in and, steals stuff out of their cars, their bikes, their maybe a moped, those types of things, which are important, and they're livability issues for sure. Well, those are worse than livability issues. But I think if you I think each town has its own socioeconomic, and there's not just one cookie cutter, plan for each one. For me, and what I try to instill is be reasonable and get out and meet people. Because I think just by the nature of, police work is a little bit negative, but if you can end that stop with showing compassion and be reasonable with folks, they come away with maybe a different perspective of, well, I thought that was going to go a completely different way. I mean, I've stopped people that have absolutely run a stop sign, didn't even see it. Stop them, and they're like, I know I'm getting a ticket. I can see it in their eyes. I know I'm getting a ticket. And you ask them a question, and, they were doing something, or maybe they're upset. It just depends on that person or what's going on. Maybe you don't give them a citation. Maybe not giving the citation will be beneficial, because it's obvious they realize I screwed up. I made a mistake. I didn't see it. I don't know why I didn't see it. I drive this road all the time. I just blew through it. It's my fault. Well, that's a person who understands. And, that may be my perspective on this stop, and maybe not on the next stop, or maybe another officer's like, nope, that's a citation. And I wouldn't, I think one way or another, whether it's good or bad, as long as it's based on nothing more than what you would do on your stop.
Right.
So did I answer that? I kind of went off a little.
Yeah, I think so. I think as a police department, that's one thing. I mean, I guess part of it is, just as a society, how do you become, so part of it's socioeconomic. I'm just curious about what are some of those intangibles that make a community a thriving, safe place, where less people are committing crime. And I guess I'll give an example. So there's, I don't know, I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know there's stats to show, if there's an absent father, if a child doesn't have a dad,
Mm-hmm.
And their mom's having to work 3 jobs and is trying to just make ends meet, kids are more likely to get in trouble. I don't know what those stats are, but there's some single moms, they do an absolutely great job. But a lot of times kids, they don't have that father figure in their life, and they can end up getting into trouble. So that's one example. And another examples are, or I guess one I could think of would be gang activity. You see markings on places, and I have no idea if there's actual gangs here, if that's just kids, doing graffiti, vandalism. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess that's
probably a little bit. Well, if I can, maybe this will shed light. We had, when I first started, we had drive-by shootings. We had gang graffiti. We had a lot more drugs, more prevalent. And I think that one of the things that we decided as a department, as I was a younger officer, is we were going to try to get those people out of here, meaning you're either going to stop your activity or you're going to move on to some other place, because you don't want that attention, which leads to jail time, which leads to eventually potentially prison time. So when you're doing those types of things, and then who the players are, you, for lack of a better word, you target them. I mean, and it's not based on anything other than behavior. If you know that person is a gang member and that they carry weapons and they're not supposed to, or they've done drive-bys, why would you drive right on past that person? You need to stop and talk to that person. So getting to know your community is another way of hopefully curtailing that. I think Newberg is, like I said, it used to be a lot more violent when I first started. Mm-hmm. And I think our ethos, or, part of what we do is we get out and talk to people.
Yeah.
And I encourage the officers to be curious, go out and see who this person is, be respectful. Don't violate their rights. But, a lot of it is just, and this is going to sound very simple, but having people get out of their car and go talk to people. If you're just playing tennis with your wife, or, you're doing something that catches the officer eye, and you go out and you talk to someone and they're not doing anything, then it's a mere conversation, right? If you see someone that's possibly doing some sort of criminal activity and you are able to stop it, or you basically briefly put that light on that person, that's not a comfortable. They would prefer that you just don't stop. Mm-hmm. And then I could do whatever I want. So I think getting out, and I mean, I know it sounds simple, oh, that can't be it, but encouraging your officers to get out and talk to people, get out of your car, go walk through the parks, in the evenings, those little things.
Yeah.
Where people like to hide, they like to hide maybe do drugs or drinking or, you take care of those littler things like the broken window effect, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You take care of some of those littler things, the bigger ones don't happen.
Yeah.
Because they want to move on. And we've had people, come in and say, I don't want to be in Newberg. Well, why is that? Because you guys stop and you talk to, you talk to a lot of people and I just don't want to be around you. So that's fine with me.
Yeah.
If you're a criminal and you don't want to be around us, then, you have options.
Yeah. So I'm sure you guys kind of know where the different hiding spots and the different places that the
new ones pop up all the time, but we're always looking.
Yeah,
for sure.
What are some common misconceptions that people have about police officers that you've had to deal with?
Well, there's some negative ones. I would say, for a little while we were all racist, right? It didn't matter what we did or, who we talked to, you're all racists and all that other stuff. And quite honestly, I mean, I would think that 99% of what we deal with is behavior. It really doesn't have anything to do with, someone's race or gender or age or any of that kind of stuff. And so, and there's a lot of people that immediately, when you stop and contact them, prime example, if you go out and you drive down the street today, look in those windshields and see if you can see who's driving. Half the time you can't tell if it's male or female. A lot of guys have longer hair now and, a lot of the girls have shorter hair and, everything changes. So I say that's, one of the big ones that we've, had to combat. And I think some of it is addressing it and some of it's just ignoring it because you know what kind of person you are. And you can turn anything into, almost anything into, well, you're just stopping me because.
Sure.
So I would say that's one of the big ones. That's probably one of the bigger ones that is just not true. I mean, I'm around these folks, all the time, and that's just not tolerated. It wouldn't be tolerated. And when you have a good culture, a good police department with a good culture, it's just not tolerated. And I'll tell you what happens is you'll see and it doesn't necessarily mean racial, but if you're not a hard worker, if you're not someone who wants to, be a positive role model or, wants to come in and work hard, and be a productive member, you'll see those people will kind of go somewhere else. If you have a really strong culture, you'll see those people leave. And if you have a bad culture, you'll see those people hang on and good people will leave because it just, those don't mesh very well.
Do you feel like before you, I know you can't, not throwing anyone under the bus, do you feel like there were ever times in the past where, there wasn't a good culture and how leadership could change that? Now we've had some good police chiefs here too. Yeah.
I think that we've always had a good culture. I think, there was a little point in time where we had some people that probably weren't as, they're not the same team that we have today. I'm always, working through the department, walking through, sometimes I'll ride with officers or I'll go out and do traffic stops or I'll go out and take calls or cover officers on stuff. So, I kind of watch. I try to carve time out to go do that. And our captains do the same thing. Supervisors do it all the time. But I don't want to lose that, sort of grip on the culture of the department. And I will stop and say something, hey, maybe we could have handled that differently this way. Or, what do you think about this, type of stuff? Because I think it's important for them to know I'm still connected. The captains are still connected and we get out and we will go out and help people and cover or just take calls, and we're not afraid to do that.
And I think that shows up. I mean, like, for example, you guys do the, what is it? The night out, the, National Night Out. And
August 5th this year, just in case you're listening.
August 5th. People get to see, like you said, these people are actually humans. And I think you've obviously had a part in it. And that's also just been kind of Newberg's culture is there's much more of a heart to serve and educate than it is. You have, I know there's places where police officers kind of have an ego trip and it's about, power control and they kind of abuse that power, especially if it's not checked or if there's, if leadership's that way, then it trickles down. But I think when people interact with Newberg's police officers, some people, it doesn't matter what you do. They're just going to be angry, cynical people and will say what they say.
Well, no one likes to get a citation. No one likes to get arrested. We understand that. That's another negative aspect. But I will tell you this, the building block of a good police officer is a good person. I don't care if they're male, female, does not matter to me what race, any of that stuff. If you're a good person, you have a good chance of being a good police officer and working for the Newberg-Dundee Police Department. If you're someone who's on an ego trip, please don't apply. I don't want you. I'm not interested in having that sort of police department or culture. I think we've worked hard to find people that really want to be public servants. And it doesn't mean that, you're going to sit there necessarily and be berated for, 30 minutes or an hour. That's not necessarily the job either, but we also try to understand emotions can run high. And so you may be very upset and ticked off and yelling at a police officer or something like that. And we try to realize that and try to understand that. Sometimes it's hard when you're, I call it being in the barrel, so to speak. But I think that we've done a good job of explaining to officers, you don't need to grind things into people. I know we've all been around those people that not only are they're right to the nth degree and they're going to let you know about it. We don't need to do that. All that does is create hard feelings and
reminds me of parenting again.
Well, but it can, you don't have to deal. I mean, customer service is a big part of the Newberg-Dundee Police Department. As a matter of fact, when I took over, and again, I had great mentors, Brian Casey, Chris Bullock. Those guys were just gold to me. I mean, they taught me how to be a police officer. They taught me how to, think beyond the sight book, right? Like, I could do this, and technically you're right, but is that the right thing for this situation? And so, I just think it's important. The building block is hiring a good person. Basically, that's where it starts. And I know that sounds, kind of like a duh moment, but you'd be surprised. There's people that are just trying to get bodies in there, and you end up with kind of a hodgepodge. And so the backside of that is treating your people well. Not that you give them every single thing that they want, or you never tell them no, but you might tell them no because this, and this. The old days of no, because I said so, like parenting, probably doesn't really work. You need to give, I feel like you need to give at least a reason. And there's times where I said no, and I thought, okay, hang on. All right, why do you want to do this? And then I find out, actually, I should have a pretty good reason. If I wouldn't have asked, then I wouldn't have known. And at least, or there are some things you just want to try. It's not, it might work really well, and it might not, but it doesn't cost much. Or, you want to make sure that you give them buy-in and value, because all of our employees are valuable. That's our most expensive and valuable resource, right? Wages are expensive these days everywhere. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I hopefully I didn't just run off.
No, I think there was I think we went down. I think the main point is just that people recognize, and I personally just appreciate the perspective. And we talked a little bit about community engagement, and that's one of the things that you mentioned that you do. A few more things I do want to talk about, sure, briefly, and I think eventually I'd like to do a full episode on with the school resource officer program. Mm-hmm. But if you could just briefly touch on that and how that's been I think it's had a major positive benefit on the schools. I
would agree 100%. So, Jeff Moreland was our school resource officer. I think he's been there for, I know he's gone through an entire cycle of, I think K through 12. So he's been there 12 or 13 years in that assignment. And he just has a very good way of connecting with people. And really, we're in the people business. I mean, I know some people might not think that, but that's the truth. We're in the people business. We deal with people every single day. We still make house calls. His job is not to enforce or be an enforcement mechanism. It's more of a relationship mechanism. And mechanism sounds a little cold, but that's really what it is. There's kids that he sees all the time. He's he wears a lot of different hats. He's a police officer. He's a counselor. Not really, but that's what some of his role is. He does some enforcement, or does probably light enforcement. In other words, he probably shouldn't do that. And these are the reasons why. He's built relationships, that have just been amazing. There's been serious crimes, that have been investigated in the schools that maybe happened in the home, that this child may or didn't tell anyone else, but told Jeff because they felt like they could trust him and they felt comfortable. And, there's parts of it that would, make you cry, is some of the things that he's been able to accomplish, in a good way, that just touch your heart. So that proved to me how valuable that is. And again, that's a relationship driven and not enforcement, citations, smoking, that kind of stuff. Although those are important, but the main thing is, relationships. So I was very fortunate when this new council came in. They asked, hey, was there something you would like to do? And I said, yeah, I'd really like to have a second SRO, school resource officer. And I kind of knew that I wanted to do the D.A.R.E program. It's a new D.A.R.E program. And it's funny, there's things that you look back in your career and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we used to pack drugs around in the school. I mean, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine. We used to take that stuff to the schools. We don't do that anymore.
I was homeschooled, so I was never, I don't know what really the D.A.R.E program. I know it has to do with the drugs. So where
it was primarily drugs and staying away from them.
Yeah. Here's the one you don't want to do, because this will make you.
Yeah, exactly. And so now this new D.A.R.E program is more about decisions. Okay. Yes, there is a light. There's about 10 weeks, where, Jay Stearns talks to, fifth grade. That's kind of the target audience. And I felt like it would make a big impact. I didn't really realize how much of an impact, because I've gone to some of those graduations, and I'm not kidding you, Dan. They feel, I watch those kids, and Jay is their cop. Like, he's Officer Jay, and he belongs to them. He's made those inroads and those relationships, and then he teaches D.A.R.E, and then they go through the graduation program, and they have to write, an essay and that kind of stuff. So it's been that connection piece that we're really missing. And he covers all of the, grade schools and middle schools. All that sounds like a lot. We need Jeff to kind of stay in the high school, because that's where the concentrated, potential problems.
Sure.
When you get older, so, did I cover everything you were thinking?
Yeah, I think that, I think
to go on and on. I could,
potentially having them on at some point, one of them.
You should have them both up there. They'd be great.
Okay. We have to figure out timing to have a time where they're both available. But, I've heard a lot of really great things, but we'll save up for another time. One of the interesting things, and like you mentioned, people accusing cops of being racist. And I know in 2020, that there's a lot of stuff in the news. It's kind of died down a bit. I researched at one point, I think there's over like 700,000 police officers nationwide. And it's like, you're going to have people who just aren't, who aren't good. It's unfortunate that then gets broadcast to, your tiny fraction of 1% of people do something wrong. And now all of a sudden all cops are bad. So anyway, that led to the whole like defund the police thing, which was just ridiculous when you think about it.
We went through that. We were defunded by 2 positions as well.
So here in Newberg?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I know in Portland there's a lot that happened. So, the idea was that, you take positions. Now, is it still that way, or are those positions back?
They're back.
Okay.
Yeah. Will instilled those, and our new council as well instilled those as fast as possible.
Yeah. I feel like hopefully there were some lessons learned by society. I'm sure you were close, obviously it was ridiculous from the outset of like, you really think that's a good idea? Okay. Can you share any stories about that? Hopefully it didn't have too much of an impact on Newberg, but I saw areas where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what happens when there's no police around.
Yeah. So, I think collectively all police sort of pulled back and just were not really engaging people. Didn't want to stop anybody for, minor things. And, really, I mean, I can't, that's a great description. Just pulled back and said, you know what? If there's something really big, we're going to respond to it. I didn't like it because I felt, I mean, you can see, right during the pandemic, how everyone, I mean, there was a lot of speeding. There were a lot more crashes. Crashes were up, speeding was up, all that stuff. And I think it's because there was less fear of being stopped. And I think that translates right into criminal stuff. If you're not willing to get out and stop and talk to people like we do, a lot in time that's not allocated, people were more brazen, and that's really what it was. Now, we didn't have, riots and stuff like that here. We had to my knowledge, we had the first march, that has ever occurred. And I want to say there was probably, I'll bet there was close to 800 to 1,000 people, at a rally. And then, came from the cultural center through the library down First Street, just shut down First Street. And that's never happened before that I'm aware of.
What, a defund the police march, or was it?
Oh, it was a rally, for the I Can't Breathe. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George Floyd. And
sure. Yeah.
So, and that, I didn't really necessarily take it like people from here weren't upset with us. They were just upset with what was going on in the nation. And so, but we had to respond to that, and we had to, kind of make adjustments. And, I think I met with every single person that wanted to be with me. And they were long days, trying to explain to people, we don't do what you saw. I mean, we train our officers not to do that. That was a tumultuous time. Yeah, for sure.
And hopefully,
especially to be an interim.
Yeah, because you joined right around that.
Yeah, so April of 2020 is when I was the interim, and so I had 14 months of cutting my teeth. And while I sat right next to Chief Casey, for 12 years. I'm just guessing. I can't remember for sure, but 10 or 12 years. Maybe a little bit longer. It's still different when you're the one making the calls, when you're the one that has to sign off on plans or, create safety plans and those types of things, because it all comes to me. It all comes back to, the person in charge, and not going to restrict that responsibility.
What was your position before you were chief?
I was a captain.
Captain. Okay. Why do you think you were the one chosen for, what do you think your captains now would say the reason that you were selected as chief?
I had a lot of support, internally in the department, and throughout the community. And I tried to treat people fair. We went through a bunch of stuff, earlier, and I feel like I kind of changed the way I deal with people in more of a positive, aspect. You can't give every single thing that every single person wants, but you have to be reasonable. And I guess, police work is probably, and I think I've said it probably way too many times, but honestly, it's about being reasonable. It's not always about being right. Or I mean, you need to be right, but what I mean is, it's being reasonable. Yeah. I mean, I could write someone that citation. I could arrest someone for that, but is that going to help them? Is that going to be better, down the street? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. You have to take each situation and what surrounds it, and sort of think about what's best for that person. And sometimes it is, the arrest, or you can't not arrest someone for domestic violence. That's
sure.
That's not good for the whole case, and it's not good for the victim. So, there are some certains that will happen. But there's a lot of things that you can work through.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as with the defund the police, what I had heard is like, oh, we'll defund the police and pay mental health professionals to come and respond to, mental health calls. It's like, but that you don't know what you're getting into. And if someone's not trained to deal with someone who's violent, that's, we were talking at the beginning about your job is to enforce the law, mm-hmm. and you don't know what situation you're going into. And sometimes there's things that you feel like should be a certain way, and you're not legally actually allowed do anything per the law because maybe it's not, technically illegal or, can you share?
Yeah, I can tell you, like, when they made, when the legislature, people voted and the legislature made, drugs, legal and took away the illegal status. We saw a lot more crime. We saw a lot more people, just open air doing drugs. And it started to become acceptable. We also attracted, that was during the time, during the pandemic, we also attracted more folks, that were using drugs that maybe came from other states. Not maybe, they came from other states. But you asked me a specific question.
Now I'm now thinking about that. Just how, people thought that you'd be able to have like a mental health professional, I guess, because there's so many of those to go around.
Yeah. There are some departments that have a mental health clinician. I think you have to match that up with what your community needs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having one, but we do have community outreach specialists that can come out. And for us, you look at a town like Newberg, Dundee, a police officer can help with some counseling. A police officer can help and get those resources that are needed, like community outreach specialists, those types of things. But that's what we need more is a police officer to first vet that out. And I've heard, people say, oh, we don't want police officers showing up to mental health. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the behavior that goes along with severe mental health are crimes. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to arrest somebody for that.
Right.
But people aren't necessarily always equipped, to deal with that. Yeah. And then of course, all of our officers have de-escalation training. They have, CIT training and, so I think police work is a little more cerebral than when I first started. You kind of assess things at the beginning. And if someone's just, having a mental breakdown, maybe you talk to them from a distance. You don't need to get so close to them. You need to try to establish that rapport. There's a whole bunch of different aspects that come into a police officer showing up to a call. It does not mean that someone's going to get arrested, which we've kind of tried to work through that because people say, well, I didn't want them to get arrested. Well, they might not get arrested, but maybe we can put them in touch with some services that will help. Yeah. So it's completely changed from when I started.
Yeah. And you kind of have to, I'm sure you have to get good at reading people too and knowing all that. Yep. But on the 110 thing, I know you gave a whole talk on City Club. Got the main point of that is that it didn't work. No, I think
it's not working now.
It's and there's new legislature that they're working on. I know you're still kind of skeptical of that too, because the whole idea is like, oh, if you go, because people, they wouldn't show up to court, it's like a citation. Obviously they're not going to show up and there's no teeth to it. And my takeaway from that is really, if you want people to behave well, you can't rely on someone's good nature. There really has to be an enforceable, sometimes people they need to go to prison for a while and be, as expensive as that is when someone's in that state, and then maybe the prison systems can help work on helping people recover well rather than just being completely punitive.
Yeah. So that was, I feel like, sold to the public, a bill of goods, quite honestly. People weren't generally going to prison for user amounts of drugs if that's just all they were, caught with. There may be other ancillary crimes that bump them up and they go to prison, but not typically in Oregon for just, possession. But what we did have in in Yamhill County is we had a really good drug court. And I think, like I said, in City Club, you don't know. It could be, it just depends on the person. It may take the first time someone's arrested and they get caught with drugs and they're like, nope, I don't want any part of this again. I want to go to treatment, or I just want to abstain. I'm not going to do that anymore. Or it could be someone who's been arrested 57 times and they finally are like, I can't do this anymore. I want to get help and I want to get clean. I will. And like I said, I will champion that person that wants to get clean all day long. But you have to keep them in jail long enough to get sober, to make that decision. And they still may have an off ramp, where they use or something like that. And again, I think we should just try to get those people some help. But at the same time, there sort of needs to, there's the carrot and the stick, right? I think there needs to be a little bit of a stick, a penalty that if you don't follow through, and then the next time you're right back in the same spot. Hopefully we can get you into treatment and get you well. I don't think that you should just throw these people away and they're bad people and, they're horrible people in society. They may have just made some mistakes and they got hooked in with the wrong people. And then they started using drugs and it's hard to get away. I understand that. I worked on the drug team for 5.5, 6 years. And my feelings have changed too. I probably wanted to arrest as many people and put them in jail and that kind of stuff. But then I kind of saw this repeat. And while that still needs to happen, I would love to see some programs on the end, but still you have a little bit of a stick to keep you on the straight and narrow and get clean. Yeah. Because I think once you're clean, you make a lot better decisions. You're there more for your family, your kids, that kind of stuff. So it's not traditionally like, I think some people think that we should just, lock people up and throw them away. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is we just need to have structure and get them to be as sober as possible for as long as possible. And maybe for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And that would be a win for society.
Yeah. A couple quick questions before we end. What's your favorite piece of technology that you get to use?
As an administrator, body cameras. As a police officer, drones. I would say that combination because if people do complain, which we usually only get about 3 or 4 complaints a year out of, like 24 to 25, 27,000 calls for service. So I don't think that's too bad. That's pretty good. I know a lot of chiefs would like to have that ratio. But body cameras, it's either there or it's not, right? Even if I can't see it on the camera itself, I can hear it. So, that's been very, very helpful to, have people come in and say, okay, well, do you want to watch the body camera video? And usually most are like, oh, you have body cam video? Yeah. No, I'm good. I just, I'm good, and I'm more welcome, to share that information with them. And not to say we don't make mistakes. We have officers, every once in a while get lippy or make a mistake and we deal with it, and then you move on. But the drones have been a game changer. When people are doing some, dangerous things, guns or weapons or that kind of stuff, we can actually get eyes on that before we even have to, make contact, if we do have to make contact. And that's a form of de-escalation, right? We're not introducing weapons into a hostile or a dangerous area. Maybe we can call them, get them on the phone, that kind of stuff, versus having to insert a police officer there that could have to make that ultimate decision, which we never want to do. Yeah.
And I know I've heard stories too of being able to find, a vehicle that runs. Yeah. It's like, well, you have the description and they try to, you go up and you see it hiding behind, the block of trees or whatever.
Signatures, it's a great tool. It's a wonderful tool. Yeah. And honestly, I was kind of skeptical about both, but they've proven me wrong.
Is body cams, is that a law, or is that just as departments have decided, hey, this is a good idea?
It's expensive. They have to decide. So our body cam program is really close to about $85,000, $90,000 a year, and a lot of it is data storage, and then equipment. So within a 5-year contract, we get the first batch of cameras, then we get another second batch about halfway through. So they're being updated as we go. So you're sort of paying it forward on that.
Sure.
But yeah, they're not cheap. But I think if you were to take those away from the police officers, I don't think they'd be very happy. I think they're happy having them.
Well, and I think it's good for the public too. Yeah. It kind of keeps officers in line who, you see in the movie, they'll like,
it keeps both sides.
Do you have administrative, do you have rules that hey, well, does it always have to be on, or whenever you're making a stop, or what
It has to be on during your stop. Now, there's times where, maybe if another officer's there, we come back and we mute the microphone because maybe we're talking about, something that they saw, something they didn't see, or, or talking about a case that may not be, relevant to evidentiary stuff. But when they're making contact, they should have they should have the body camera rolling.
Yeah. What's your favorite car to drive in the department?
Favorite car to drive
or vehicle?
department?
It's just,
Yeah, I used to have a Tahoe that I loved. That car was old, but I loved that car. The Durangos are pretty nice. The Tahoes that we have for the supervisors, I'd say the Tahoes for the supervisors, but I don't get to drive them.
oh,
We have the sergeants and corporals driving those.
okay.
So they're kind of their cars.
So what do you drive?
I drive one of the older cars in the fleet. It's a Ford Expedition. I'm sorry, not Expedition, Explorer. Ford Explorer, and it's got about 106,000 miles on it. But I don't need a car that, the other guys need. The guys who are doing guys and gals doing the real work, are the ones that get the new cars and the new builds and safety features and stuff like that. I don't really need one.
What's the little boy in me wants to know, what's the fastest you've ever driven?
The fastest I've ever driven was about 120 miles an hour. I was trying to catch up to one of our police officers who was tailing a bank robbery subject that had just robbed a bank here in the Fred Meyer area. And they were following him in a marked unit, and I was just concerned that they were going to really stop and maybe take shots at that police officer. So I wanted to make sure that we had enough officers there to hopefully talk him out of that. Take him into custody peacefully versus any kind of weapons being displayed or a serious incident. A more serious incident, was officer involved shooting. Yeah,
I'm sure that was probably adrenaline inducing in many ways then.
Yeah, not as much anymore. I'm not saying you get used to it. We're certainly not, and Portland has a lot of crime and, a lot of, they probably have incidents, every couple of hours they've got something going on. That's a big city. But, I've been doing it for 29 years, so almost 29 years. So, I don't get that charge like I used to.
Sure.
And I'm behind a desk more anyway. So
yeah.
I'd love to get out, but I just can't.
Yeah. What's kind of the most important message you'd like to give to the people of Newberg and Dundee?
I would say the most important message, well, a couple different things, and more for society, give everyone some grace. I think that people are so quick, to zing someone verbally or, catch them in a trap or, I see a lot of people that are extremely gracious, and that's really what makes me most proud. I would say as a society, if we could just dial it back a little bit and give each other some grace, you don't always have to be in someone's face and write and, cell phones, in someone's face and that kind of stuff. Let's just be a better society. I would say for the officers, just pray for us, keep us in your thoughts, wave, with all your fingers. There's some guys that just wave with one, just keep them in your thoughts. They're out trying to do a tough job, and they're doing it for you. They're not getting, any other sort of joy out of it other than hopefully they stopped some crime today or they made your day better, just by being there. So I think that's probably what the two things that I would say. Yeah.
And a quick thing that reminded me of a misconception that sometimes you hear at the end of the month, like, oh, watch out. The cops are trying to get their quota and they're going to pull you over, but
no, we don't have a quota. We expect them to work hard all 30 days, not just maybe the last 2 or 3. So yeah, there's no quota. There's no such thing. Of course we want them to be busy. But we don't tell officers how many citations to write. We don't tell them to write citations. We tell them what make traffic stops, and then you make the determination on what you decide. So that's kind of the message, for that.
Yeah, thank you, because I've gotten into disagreements with people. So now I've heard it from the chief himself. Last question. I ask everyone on the podcast, what gives you hope for the future of Newberg?
Hope for the future. I think our young people, I'm impressed. One of the things I was looking at some of the stats, for this is sort of off a little bit, but, like our drug use is greatest between 30 and 39. It's less between 20 and 29. It's even less, below that. So that gives me some some hope, that, alcohol usage is down. Not that, necessarily that's a horrible thing. Using alcohol or drinking a glass of wine with dinner or something like that is horrible. But what I'm saying is that's less of a problem for society, less, issues, that can come with that. People don't always make the best decisions, when they're drunk or high, that's for sure. But I would say, yeah, our young people, really, I'm encouraged, to see, how this turns out. I think a couple of years ago, I wasn't sure, just kind of how things were politically, and I don't want to get too far into that stuff, but, I just see our young people, being a lot smarter than I was, when I was growing up. So, that's one of the things that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. I look forward to when I can have, Jay and Jeff on at some point. I have a feeling they probably have had some impact as far as that goes. But
they absolutely have had some impact. 100%, no doubt in my mind.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. I know we went a little bit over time, but I look forward to sharing this message with the community.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Givingtown Podcast. Our mission with this podcast is to provide hope and inspiration to our community by sharing the stories of the amazing leaders here. This podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group. And whether you're looking to buy or sell your home anywhere around Newberg and beyond, we would love to serve you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter with the link in the show notes, and I'll catch you in the next episode.